one Halloween, a little boy came to the front door and he says, well, everybody in the neighborhood says you're Siri. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, you don't sound like Siri. And I said, how about now?
Välkommen. Bem-vindo. Witamy. 欢迎.
Welcome to the Blend Podcast. Fresh, fun, informative. This is your backstage pass for exclusive language industry news and views, interviews with leaders, translators, and pros, and insights on the intersection of words, business, and culture.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. I have Susan Bennett, who's a voice actor who's been working with GM Voices, who's now Blend Voices for a while now. Welcome, Susan. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of dive into the long list of questions that I prepared for you?
Okay. Well, I am a singer, keyboard player, voice actor, and speaker. And I'm probably best known as the original voice of Siri. So,
Yeah.
I think you wanted to know my education. I graduated from Brown University. And unfortunately, I never really utilized that degree.
I can relate to that.
Went off into music and other crazy things. So.
Well, yes, that's just life, but I can relate to that. I've studied something completely different from what I'm doing now, so I can understand that.
Yeah. So then we learned what we didn't want to do, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, as you said, you started your professional journey as a singer. And then how did you, I don't want to say end up, because obviously you didn't end up, but how did you find your way into voice acting? Like, how does transition happen?
Well, as with many things that have happened to me in my life, it was just sort of a fortunate accident in a way. Back in the day, this would be in the 70s and 80s, I used to sing a lot of commercial jingles. Okay. And in a studio, a very popular studio for close to 50 years, Doppler, which is no longer here in Atlanta. But I used to sing, you could actually make a living as a jingle singer in those days.
Wow.
And so I would work, anywhere from 2 to 5 times a week doing that. And one day, and I wish I could remember the product that we were speaking about, but it's been too many years. When we finished singing this particular jingle, the voice actor was supposed to come in and read the copy for the spot, and that person did not show up. So the owner of the studio at the time, Pete Caldwell, said, Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy. And so I did, and it was pretty instinctive. I did it pretty readily. And so I thought, oh, ding, 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 I can do this.
Yeah.
So they used my voice, and I just thought, wow. So I went and found a good voice coach, and then I got a talent agent, and I've been doing that sort of work since. So that's been many, many years now.
That's amazing. Also, like the comment about having no accent, I never really thought about it. Because I guess, I'm outside, I'm not American. So for me, there's always some kind of accent that I can, connect to Americans. So that's actually interesting to me when he said no accent.
It's a neutral American accent.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
Okay.
They, in the UK, of course, they would consider me as having an accent. But, and Atlanta is in the South, and there's a very, very strong Southern accent.
Right.
And so I think what he was meaning is you don't have a Southern accent, or you don't have a really strong accent. So come over and read this. So I am considered it to be having a neutral American accent.
And I'm sure you're right, because again, I think accent is something is cultural. So to each one of us, an accent will sound a little bit different.
Exactly.
Depends. Depends on where we come from. I have so many other questions now that I didn't write. So just a little bit, can you talk about for, inspiring voice actors? What is the process? What do you recommend? Because you said you have a voice coach and, an agent and all of that. So how, the process, what do I need to do if I want to be a voice actor?
Well, it's very different now than when I first broke in. Technology changed everything. Basically what it did was increase the number of your competitors like a millionfold. Because, when I first built my voiceover booth at home, I spent thousands of dollars to build this really nice soundproof booth with great equipment and all that stuff. And now all you need is a smartphone, a mixer, a good microphone, and a closet. And so consequently, it's opened up the field to a lot more people. And also it's opened up to a lot more amateurs, which can be very frustrating for people who have studied and who are professional, competing against people who have not learned the skill. But for me, I always believe that knowing as much as you can and being as good as you can be in a particular thing is going to be the best route to go. And so what I would suggest for anyone getting into voiceover, first of all, you have to be able to read well. It's not as significant it's not as much a necessity now as it used to be. When, back in the day when I first worked at GM Voices, they had to have talent that could read through a whole paragraph without making a mistake, because
it's harder than it looks. It's harder than it looks.
Especially because not that many people know how to write for words that are read aloud.
Right.
For things that you're going to read in a book, you can write a sentence, like Isabel Allende sentences that go on and on and on with 900 adjectives. No, that's not the way you write for something that's, you need to write short, succinct sentences, which, it doesn't always happen. And so the voice actor has to be good at cold reading. Yeah. And as I say, not so much so today, because it's much easier to fix any mistakes, or especially deep breath. They didn't used to deep breath in those days. They just left the sound of the breathing in there.
Really?
And so, but I think for potential voice actors who are listening to this podcast, just get to be as good as you can possibly be, which means be able to read a lot of different types of things, be able to read cold, because all of this stuff will be an advantage to you. And practice. I mean, like read things out of a magazine and things like that, just practicing. But I also highly recommend anybody that's going to do anything in any kind of field of performance, I highly recommend doing improv classes, because it helps you think on your feet, and anything that's going to allow you to contribute to the product that you're trying to read about, help the producers or the writers. Mm-hmm. Not that they're going to ask for your input, but anything that's going to be able to relate to these people and try to get across what they're trying to get across is going to be to your advantage. So, yeah,
that's really, really good tips. And if we're already talking about that, what's your favorite thing about being a voice actor?
I think the thing I like about it is it's different every single time. Now, except for GM Blend, pretty much it's certain that you're going to somewhere in there you're going to have a please press 1. But other than just messaging, if you're doing commercials or narrations, any animation, anything like that, every job is pretty much different, and so that's always fun. I always enjoyed that kind of challenge.
It's very different, and you did so many things. When I've read a little bit, I've seen, your career is so diverse. We will get to Siri obviously soon, but you started with, you did, movies, and you did, I thought you did a lot of narration for, air commercials and air companies and stuff like that. So it's so diverse and so different from each other. So I wanted to know if you have a favorite. I know it probably can be a little bit hard to say what's your favorite, but if you have a favorite, what it is, and also what is the process is so different, right? When you're we're getting ready to, just narrate something versus play a role. So get us inside this process. How do you prepare to each kind of different work?
Well, for me, it's pretty instinctive. I can tell what I need to do. And so what you want to do is get familiar with the script. Sometimes, especially if you're doing narrations, many times there are things that you're not sure about the pronunciation. So you want to check out those things in advance. And as I said, if the script is written in these long, sentences, it's helpful to practice the script And, if there's something that you're faced with that you're not that familiar with, I mean, you can just go online and find a lot of similar things. So, always, as with any job,
that's true.
Is always going to be an advantage.
Right.
Any way that you can prepare. Yeah.
What's your favorite type of voice acting jobs?
I used to love to do dialogue spots. But it was more fun in the past because we all used to congregate in the studio.
Yeah.
And that was a lot more fun because it was like almost like theater. You would be working off each other. And now it's basically all up to the engineer. I mean, they'll tell you the role, then well, give me 3 takes of this and do it high and do it low and do it, funny and then do it slow. And, and you're just in their booth by yourself.
By yourself. So weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a strong imagination for that, I'm guessing.
Hopefully so. Yeah. I mean, hopefully you do have a good imagination.
Well, yeah, but the way I see it, I mean, you're an actor. I mean, I know it's called voice actor, but it is being an actor. You do need to portray the. Yeah, you need to especially probably when you're doing voices as the role. So you need to have like a special, the feelings and the emotion and all of that, and that's pure acting, the way I see it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Is there a type of job that you will refuse to do, or things that you're not comfortable with, or do you feel that special areas of voice acting require special speciality, for example?
Well, I don't like to do things that are too sexual or too, openly, violent or anything like that.
Yeah.
But most of the time I don't run into things like that. I can only recall one time, and actually it was for GM that they wanted me to read this very sort of sultry, sexy thing. And I just thought, well, I don't mind sounding sultry, but I don't really want to say this copy. So they let me off the
hook. Makes sense. And this voice acting thing evolved, and you talk about it yourself at the beginning of our conversation. It evolved so much in the last decades.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the difference of that, except of whatever aspect of the technical aspect that you already said? But, were there some kind of apps or services that you recorded your voice for early on and now completely different? Like, how do you see that, moving along in the last couple of decades, which had huge technology, jump?
Well, I think like everything else, it's sort of, I think it's allowed a lot of people who really don't have skills to be able to still do the work. And back in the day, you would say, well, just because you have a beautiful voice doesn't mean that you can be a voice actor, because you have to be able to act, and also a lot of it has to do with just cultural trends. And now, for many years now, it's been, they just want you to sound like the person next door. They're not an announcer. We don't want an announcer. And so, and I think that trend continues on now. So
it's fascinating. Okay, let's talk about you being the original voice of Siri, which I was very excited about because I'm a huge Apple fan. So I have so many questions on that. But let's start with how did it happen? I mean, I obviously know the story, but I'm anxious to hear you saying how it happened. How did you find yourself as a voice?
Well, I know the background of how it happened, but I actually do not know exactly how it happened, because I don't know who chose my voice, when that person chose my voice.
Right.
My recordings started in 2005. And I did recordings for GM that were called IVR recordings, interactive voice response. And so any of the voices that you hear on GPSs or, any, phone messaging, that sort of thing, it all came from these types of recordings. And when we started doing the work in 2005, I noticed that the scripts were very different.
Yeah.
Because, little unbeknownst to the actors, what this was leading into was Siri and Alexa and all the, and Cortana, Google Voice and all this.
None of us knew about that. It wasn't existing.
No,
2005, take everyone back. Then we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have, Hey Googles. We didn't have Alexa, nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Siri was the first, and she showed up in 2011.
Right.
Now, this is 2005, 6 years previously.
Exactly.
And so we were just told that we were just doing some generic phone voices. Yeah. And so I found it interesting just from a voice actor point of view that it was very different from anything else I'd recorded, because what they ended up doing, this process is called concatenation. And you record these sentences, phrases and sentences, which all had to be read in the same way. The same pitch, the same tone, the same pacing, and the same pitch. Yeah. Because they were going to go in and extract sounds from those recordings and make them into other phrases and sentences. Right. This is called concatenation. Technicians and computers would go in and do this extracting. And so consequently, reading these scripts, it was really, really tedious because most of the sentences didn't make any sense. Right. Because they were created just for sound and not at all for content. And so I'd be reading sentences like, cow hoist in the tub hut today. Say schist fresh issue today. Wow. Militia oi hallucinate bakra okra ooze. And so
doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. No, right, exactly. Right. And so, it was very tedious because we had 4-hour sessions 5 days a week for the month of July 2005. Yeah. And then when they came back with me after Siri came out and they wanted some more recordings done, addresses and things like that, I said, okay, 2 hours, only 2. When you use your voice, and it's funny when you use your voice and you're doing sort of a monotone sound, it seems to be a lot more taxing on your vocal cords than because normal, human speech, we speak like this, we go up and down, this and that, but if it's on the same plane all the time, reading these crazy sentences, it gets very, very tedious. But we didn't really know what we were doing. And I talked to some other original Siri voices about this. The 4 original Siri voices were the North American, that was me, Australian voice, British, and I think the 4th one was French. And the British and French voices were male.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. In fact, the British voice is the
female, actually.
No, the British voice is John Briggs, pretty famous voice actor and announcer in the UK. Oh. And he had the same experience. So it's interesting to hear.
Yeah. So, and then 6 years later, you randomly found out, right, that what you did then is actually Siri. Yeah. I cannot even imagine how you must felt. How did you feel?
I was horrified. Mainly because for something that big, you would think that you would have to audition. And I guess I was auditioning, but I was auditioning unbeknownst to myself. Yeah. And the other horrifying thing is that we weren't paid. Okay. And so there's this voice on millions and millions of people's phones. And I don't mean to sound as if I'm a money grubbing person, but if you think about it from an actor's point of view, a lot of, if you're, for instance, on a phone machine or something, you say, blah, 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 please press 1. No one is paying attention to that voice unless it's a crazy voice or a celebrity voice. Right. Basically, what they're trying to do is just get the information that you're disseminating. But all of a sudden, your voice is in this little computer phone and it becomes a persona.
Stuck to our hands all the time. Yeah.
Right, and people are talking to you. Yeah. Who knows how many times a day. Right. And suddenly your voice is so ubiquitous that all of a sudden you're in this position. I mean, it totally changed my voiceover career. Yeah. And, that's why it took me 2 years to reveal myself as the voice, because I feared that it was going to affect my regular voiceover. But, like anything else with life, things happen and you have to figure out a way to adjust. And so I did that and actually started a whole new career thanks to Siri. So,
How does it feel to know that? And if I creep you out, I'm sorry, but just this knowledge of millions of people interact with your voice.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's your voice and also not your voice. Because as you said, it's gone through some technical things. And obviously there's now this, people are talking to this, character of Siri. They're not talking to Susan.
Right.
But in a way, it's still some part of you there. So how, I don't know, do you sometimes just think about it still now?
I don't.
No?
No. And for me, I've always been able to compartmentalize. And so for me, I had to make a little bit of a disconnect. I mean, at probably the most emotions that I went through were at the very beginning.
Yeah.
When I found out I was the voice without my knowledge or permission or payment or anything like that. It was pretty freaky. And to this day, I've never heard word one from Apple.
Really?
Not one.
Wow.
The only, had a chance to meet Steve Wozniak at a tech conference years ago. Now, for those of you who don't know, he was Steve Jobs' partner, and he was the man that actually built these amazing machines. And so for a while there, I was going to be doing working with him as a speaker, but he charges so much money, no one wanted to add anybody else on. So that didn't work out. But he was the one that encouraged me. He called me up on stage on this tech conference. And of course, I'm an actor. I've been acting since high school. Yeah. And he said, well, you're very comfortable on stage. You really ought to think about doing this. And I thought, yeah. So I went home and I wrote up a presentation, and my agent started to book me on speaker events, which I enjoy doing. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And that's going to lead us to my next question, how people react to the fact that you are the original voice of Siri. Because I've seen your TED Talks. I know I was extremely excited to talk to you because, again, I'm a geek. But, how does people react?
In different ways, but for the most part, people are pretty amazed. And when like, for instance, one Halloween, a little boy came to the front door and he says, well, everybody in the neighborhood says you're Siri. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, you don't sound like Siri. And I said, how about now? Anyway.
And the kid like, oh my God.
I think most people are just find it interesting. And some people are very surprised. Just go, oh my God, and get all excited about it. Yeah.
It is a fun fact to tell at parties for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that most, that people, what I discovered early on, which totally amazed me, is that people really have built up a relationship with this character. And sometimes they would just talk to Siri just to talk to her and see what she would say.
Right.
And because at the beginning, I'm not sure the way she is now. I don't really talk to those disembodied voices. So, in the beginning, she was kind of snarky, and I think people really enjoyed that. The very first time I spoke to Siri, I said, "Hi, Siri, what are you doing?" And she goes, "I'm talking to you."
Mind blowing. That would freak me out if I would talk to Siri and I would hear myself going back and like, oh my God.
Yeah, it is. There's just kind of like, ew. It's hearing my voice on radio and TV commercials and things like that. But when when she's just kind of responding to you, it's like, oh no.
That's different. That's what I'm saying. You obviously used to, because I've been doing it for so long. So you used to hearing your voice in other places. But there's something about the fact that is our phones have become, the most important things that most of us have. And we really do have some kind of it's strange to say it, but we do have some kind of relationship with our phone nowadays, right? Because, we don't even need our computers. We can work from our phones. We can do anything. Right. We can order anything. And what you said about people talking to Siri, so it kind of like became a thing. I remember, sometimes they kind of put some kind of, pop culture references into it. I remember when it was Game of Thrones was broadcasting and people were asking Siri, is Jon Snow dead or alive? Stuff like that. So it kind of became this character in our lives that people really connect with. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, represent that. I'm sure you're getting a lot of interesting reactions when people learn about that.
Yeah. Very, very animated reactions. And I still get a lot of requests for autographs and things like that. So it's pretty funny.
I can imagine. So you talk a little bit here, and I know you talk about it in other interviews as well, about kind of like this process that you went through from not wanting to reveal yourself as the original voice of Siri and now feeling comfortable. Are you really now in a place where you're like, I'm proud of it, it's good, or do you kind of wish maybe I should have kept that a secret? And the reason I'm asking is because I know that many voice actors choose to stay anonymous. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like, it's very common for voice actors not to reveal themselves. So that's the angle that I'm asking about.
Yeah, if I had the choice, I probably would have remained anonymous. But, in a sense, it wouldn't have done any good because the voice is so ubiquitous. It was so everywhere.
Right.
That, people, anybody with a halfway decent ear that was speaking to that app for, frequently would get to know that voice.
Yeah.
And so for me, it became a really great life lesson because it wasn't a choice for me.
Yeah.
It was a choice for me to reveal myself, but It wasn't a choice for me to be the voice of Siri.
To be the voice.
Someone else chose that voice. And so it's like a lot of things in life. Sometimes you just don't have any control over what happens. And so you have to figure out a way to deal with it. Am I going to, have heart attack and just, leave? Or am I going to deal with it in some way?
Yeah.
And so, I think it was a very helpful thing for me at that point in my life to say, well, how can I make this work for me? Yeah. And another little complication was the fact that I'm not really a gregarious person. I'm not an extrovert at all. Mm. And so, probably I could have made millions of dollars by now as Siri if I'd had the ta-da personality. No, I can rise to the occasion. I'll have to say I can. When I get on stage, I can be that person.
Yeah.
But, so it was a very interesting thing. And it's and I think it's an important thing for people to not feel bad about themselves if they can't be a certain way. We are who we are, which isn't to say that we shouldn't stretch and try to do more than we're doing. But
boundaries.
If you absolutely are an introvert, you shouldn't feel bad about yourself if you're not going to want to go out and be on, some news show.
Right, but I've seen your interviews, so you're doing really good. So you kind of
well, thank you.
No, so exactly what you said. We have sometimes things happen to us. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be neutral, but it will still affect our lives. And the real kind of lesson is how we deal with it and what how do we uplift it, next. And you said that once it was known that you are the original voice of Siri, it changed your career.
It did.
How so?
Yeah. Well, there were several factors, so I can't really point at Siri as the one thing that changed everything. But the fact that people recognize my voice, it really kind of limited me to the number of. I do very little commercial work anymore, unless it's Siri related. I did some commercials. In fact, your audience might enjoy seeing some of these for a company called Userway. And I did on-camera commercials for them, and as the voice of Siri.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun. It was like, I wish you could do more things like this because I've been accepted. This is who I am, and I'm still able to work. That's good. I love to work. So it was, it was a little daunting when I first found out I was the voice because I knew it was going to change things. As I've said, you learn to deal with the cards that you're given.
Yeah.
And many times you can turn it into something completely new. That's what happened to me with the Siri thing. All of a sudden I started to do speaker events and talking about, how Siri came about, how the recordings were done and all that stuff. And it's pretty interesting because, Siri, the original voice of Siri will always be the first.
Right.
She was the very first.
She was the first. Yeah.
And so, she's in the history books forever. So it's, I think it's always going to be interesting to people to well, this was the first. How did that come about?
Yeah.
You were doing this when you were doing it. So
because there's a whole generation now that doesn't know that there's a whole generation who kind of born into having, this kind of technology, which is amazing to think about. So, because Siri was out when I was in my early 30s. So you live kind of like half lives without this kind of technology. And now it's everywhere. And I think the interesting thing with Siri is it keeps being in more products, right? It started with the phone, but it's in our computers, it's in our watches, it's in God knows what they will invent it next. So that's also must be very interesting because it kind of, continue to grow this kind of character or whatever it is, so I'm bet that's also something that, again, started with a phone, but now you have your voice in so many devices.
Well, the voice has been changed 2 or 3 times now. So
completely? Because it still sounds, oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, the voice that's on Siri now, at least the last time I heard it, was much younger sounding to me.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
And I think that's probably, I'm sure they're spending millions of dollars trying to figure out, what voice works best for people. The using Siri the most.
Yeah, there's also so many languages and accents. Just in English, you have 5 or 6 options just in English. So obviously all the other languages, it's completely different. So it's interesting. What is your dream project or role to voice act? Because obviously you didn't know that you're recording Siri. So
I've always wanted to play a cartoon character. I've always wanted to do animation, but I guess I don't want it badly enough because you really need to be in LA to do that. And at this stage of the game, I'm not interested in doing that. But if anybody wants a character, let me know.
Something other than Siri, if you know what I mean.
That's so amazing. I mean, this ability to change your voice like this is fascinating to me. It's amazing.
I think a lot of it has to do with my ear. I have a good ear, and because I'm a musician. Yeah, and you'll find, I think, if you interview many other voice actors, I think you'll find a lot of them who came from music. Because there's a rhythm to speech, and you have to. And
that's true.
Yeah. And I think that you would find that there are lots and lots of former musicians or continue to be musicians as well as voice actors.
It does make sense, though. I mean, I can see the connection. It makes sense that it's kind of like on the same skill set that you'll need for that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I'm out of questions.
Really? Did we go through all those 3 pages?
Because that's the thing. When I write, it looks so long. But usually, it's just once we start talking with each other, we kind of got to a lot of the question naturally. So if you have anything else that you kind of want to share, if you have a tip, either for we talk about voice actors, maybe for companies hiring and auditioning different voices actors. Do you have anything about that?
All I can say is that, it's easier now to practice and to hear different sounds and replicate different sounds and learning how to pronounce different things. That's all, there's so much online,
Right.
And, but I highly recommend actually getting a voice coach. And there are good voice coaches all over, in all cities.
Yeah.
So, I would, and if you can't find one, of course, I'm sure they're online, but, or even just getting into acting, even if you don't feel like you want to do stage acting, anything that's going to increase your scope of how you hear different voices and different sounds, anything that, any kind of situations that are going to require you to have different responses and to project different emotions and different feelings out to your audience. So I'm just really a big fan of doing as much as you can possibly do to practice.
Yeah. I think it's a good tip for no matter what your position is, it's a good tip.
Yeah. Be prepared. Say, be prepared.
Be prepared and work hard and continue to kind of develop yourself. I think that's very, very important. Mostly things.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I also think it's important to know yourself and to know your limitations. And if you're trying to be a voice actor and you're not good, I mean, and by not good, I mean, I think that you're going to, at some point you should be able to hear that you're not getting it.
Right.
And so, have the courage to find something else to do.
Yeah.
Or
so
if you want to get
relevant tip. Yeah.
I mean, and it would be a hard thing to accept. On the other hand, if you really, 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 really want it that badly, I would think if you worked hard enough, although there's definitely an ear involved, you've really got to. It's like saying, "Oh, I really want to be a great singer." It's like, well, can you carry? No.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for a singer that can't carry a tune. So.
Well, case in point, me. But I completely agree, and I think it's a form of art. So I feel like you do need some basic born with talent, able to do it. The same as acting is, normal acting. You still need to, you can, go to acting school, but you still need this kind of like talent, born with talent. I don't think anyone can be a voice actor or actor, to be honest.
Right. I think you have to, no one can be a techie genius either. I mean, that's
true.
There's no way on earth. I mean, even to save my own life, could I figure out some of that stuff? So, I mean, we all get to know each other. We know the gifts that we have and the things that we can do naturally well. And oftentimes that just works hand in hand. Something you enjoy, something that you do well, you tend to enjoy doing.
Right.
So you can do a good job at it. So it's very satisfying.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Great tips. Thank you so much, Susan. It was really a pleasure. Thank you for your time and for this lovely conversation. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode by following us on social media. If you're in the localization business, join our private Facebook group, Pro Localization Club. See you there.
Thanks for tuning in to the Blend podcast. Follow Blend on social for updates and future episodes. We'll see you next time.